Hi everyone, I'm Dana, aka Leafy Diva on all of my socials, and today we're going to talk alocasias. I have been growing alocasias for about 6 or 7 years. Most of what I'm going to tell you is through my experience. I just want to show you the ones that I have. We're going to go keep this really casual. We're just going to talk about them a little bit, and along the way, I'm going to give you some tips and tricks and some advice based on my experience. This big boy right here is my Alocasia chantrieri. I got him in December 2021 as a sprouted corm. Believe it or not, I was looking for an Aslanii, and when the seller showed two sprouted corms, I jumped on it, got it, grew the plant for a couple months, found out it was indeed a chantrieri and not an Aslanii. At the time, I was livid because I did not want a chantrieri. I didn't like these plants. I didn't think they were cute. I really wanted that pink veinage that the Aslanii has, but I kept it. Seller gave me my money back, said I could keep it. So I just grew it. And I should be thanking her right now, right? Each individual alocasia that I have has different requirements for light. I have 8 foot tall south facing windows, wall to wall in this room. So the plants get a lot of light. This plant, however, tends to like indirect light. I keep him in a south facing window, but a few inches away from the window. He seems to like it that way. If I give him too much light, his leaves will start to point down, and then I notice the coloring starts to get pale. My dragon scale, this plant really doesn't tolerate bright light that well. So I have him in a very shady place in one of my corners, and he's absolutely thriving. As far as soil, I almost exclusively use lechuza pine. That is a mineral substrate. It contains minerals. I'll go over that in a different video. Zeolite, pumice, lava rock, and a slow release fertilizer. That seems to do very well for most of my alocasias. However, I only really started using pine a couple years ago, and I didn't transition all of my plants at once. I had my poly in soil for most of its life. I've had my poly for about 5 years. It's only been out of soil for about a year. Most of my alocasias they all started in soil because I was using soil before I even knew about pine. And I'm going to tell you this, I'm not picky when it comes to soil. My alocasia poly is in Miracle Grow because I used to be a very avid gardener. And when I started getting more into house plants, I was treating my house plants like I was treating garden plants. So I just went and got a big bag of Miracle Grow and was just potting things up. So that's how a lot of my house plants got potted. I was not using a special soil. And then when I started to get more into aeroids and learning and understanding their needs, I would add perlite. I bought some orchid bark and I would incorporate that too. And it worked really well. And then I started using a mix of cocoa coir, perlite, horticultural charcoal, orchid bark, sometimes like I don't know. I eyeball everything. I don't have like a soil recipe or anything. And then I also started to get into self-watering planters. I feel like that was a game changer. So as far as my alocasias are concerned, all of them absolutely love self-watering planters. And I'm sorry that I don't have all of them in front of you now because I have huge plants and I can't. It took me a lot to bring this over here. I know you always hear that it's normal for an alocasia leaf to drop and one grows. And in my experience, that just is not the case. What I feel or what I believe is that if your alocasia doesn't have ideal growing conditions, it's going to drop leaves when it grows new ones because it can't support them. So if your alocasia is thriving and it's happy, it should be able to hold on to more than a few leaves. Plants like the chantrieri for the poly, for the dragon scale, for most alocasias, they can hold on to lots of leaves. You just have to know how to care for them. And what's interesting is I've become so familiar since I've had this alocasia for a while, my chantrieri, I can kind of understand what its needs are. So this chantrieri, for the very first time, it dropped 2 leaves while it was producing another one. That is not normal for my chantrieri, so I knew something was wrong. And people were trying to tell me, like, no, this is just what alocasias do. I know this is not what my alocasias do. So I went ahead and repotted, found out, like I thought, that it was really, really root bound. And so I repotted it and it rewarded me since the repot with 5 new leaves. 5. Like this thing just keeps putting out leaves. And so for the 5 new leaves that I got, only this one looks like, Like, I'm not expecting it to hold all of his leaves, but only this one looks like it might fall, maybe, possibly. And then this is my Alocasia dragon scale. I got this in, I think, November of 2021. Back in those days, these are really hard to find. So I was like super happy when I got one. And I got two actually. They were very, very tiny. And over time, this is what they've grown into. I don't really think about this plant. The plant doesn't really get spider mites at all. And if it does get spider mites, but they don't really mess with this plant unless the plant is stressed. So if I see that there are spider mites on this plant at any given time, I already know that something is wrong because this plant typically does not attract spider mites. And so I noticed that on any plant, and this is not just for alocasias, but all of the airways that I have, if there is a pest pressure that is usually not there any other time, the plant's not known for it, a lot of times it's a good indication that the plant's stressed, that the plant needs something it's not getting. Healthy plants can fight off disease and pests a lot better than unhealthy plants. The other one I have is and I'm showing you I'm showing you the ones that I can fit in my lap. This is one of my newer additions. This is the Alocasia longa biloba. It's a variety called Lucifer. I am not as familiar with this. I got this a few months ago. I've been looking for this plant ever since I saw it on Instagram, and I just thought like that plant looks sick. Like that plant looks really, really dope. And I finally tracked one down, and this is what I got. This is not the longa biloba Lucifer. I got sold the wrong plant. And this one I'm also not happy about, and I'm really hoping that it works like the Chanchieri and it just grows really big and gets stunning. But I'm still in my feelings about it. But I said I'm going to grow this anyway and, deal with it. And hopefully this will reward me by pushing out really big, pretty leaves. This is Alocasia New Guinea Gold. He looks a little sad right now because I literally just repotted him a couple hours ago. I noticed that the leaves were starting to yellow on the outside. You can kind of see that. And I kind of realized, okay, something's probably wrong. I had planted this in a pot that was too large for it. So I figured there's probably some root rot, some like just a lot of wetness and moistness going on in a planter. And that's exactly what it was. So I put it I broke up the two that I had. The other one is in their propagator, and I think I'm actually going to plant it outside. And then I put this one in a much smaller container. And actually, it's drying out already. So I'm really happy about that. But this should be way bigger than this because this plant makes so many pups. I have sold pups. I don't sell plants, by the way. I have given away so many pups. I have sold pups. I have, this plant just readily produces pups. This one is a pup. My mother is, I don't know where she is. I probably gave it away at some point. This plant, as far as light is concerned, is a lot different from some of my other alocasias. This plant will take a lot of light, but not as much light as, say, my Alocasia zebrina. When I had those two in the same window together, this one suffered a lot while the zebrina completely thrived. But yeah, so that's the Alocasia New Guinea Gold. This one is also new to the team. He's an Alocasia heterophylla, aka Dragon's Breath. And this is an alocasia that I really wish I would have known about sooner, because had I known about this alocasia a few years ago, I would have absolutely had it. It'd have been massive by now. So it's like I came in late in the game with this alocasia. And that's all I have to say, because as far as my allocation, I was not supposed to be getting any more allocations because I just don't have the space for them. But these are like new to the team. So these are like team 2024, like that's when they're going to have their glow up probably. They're little babies right now, but I can't wait until they get big and massive. I wonder if I forgot any. The other one is my Maharani. I do not remember when I got the Maharani. It took me a long time to figure out the Maharani because it got root rot so many times when I first got it, because I really didn't understand its care needs, because I'm used to my alocasia just growing and me just pouring water into it, and it kept rotting. And so what I learned about that was my first jewel alocasia. And that jewel alocasia, they grow really slowly. They don't have as much watering needs. As far as fertilizer is concerned, I fertilize all of my alocasias on every feeding. I use Foliage Pro. I am not a fertilizer snob. I only look at the formulation. I don't really care what brand it is. I will use Miracle Grow. I was using Miracle Grow all purpose before I switched to Foliage Pro. And the only reason why I switched to Foliage Pro is because when I started doing semi-hydro, there are some trace minerals, some trace nutrients that your plants aren't going to get in a soilless medium. And so Foliage Pro had everything in it. And that's the only reason why I switched. Yeah, so Foliage Pro has been working really well for me. I've been using it for, I don't know, a little over a year. I'm satisfied with it. My plants like it. I dilute it about 1/3 strength and I just give it to my plants at every watering. I've never experienced any burning with it. I've never experienced anything. It just works. So that's all I really care about is things that work. Anyway, as far as humidity is concerned, my house is usually around, my house really almost never goes under 50% humidity. Most of the times it hovers around 50 to 60%. At night that changes. On rainy nights, rainy days, I can get up to 80% humidity some nights, but most nights it's around 70. So that's a normal night, 65 to 70. And then during the day, about 55 maybe. I do have supplemental humidity from a humidifier. I use a Levoit humidifier. This time of year, I don't really use it that often because the humidity is okay. It's more for like the winter months when the air is really, really dry and my plants are like suffering and I'm freaking out and I don't know what to do. So yeah, that's as far as humidity is concerned. We all know it is no big secret. Spider mites are the bane of my existence here with my plants. I have two species of spider mites. I have red mites and I have the two spider mites. They wreak havoc on my alocasias. Actually, spider mites was such a problem for me at one point. I culled a lot of plants from my collection because I just got tired of spider mites. So the plants that I have right now that you see are plants that absolutely should be here. These are the plants that I absolutely want here that I get joy from. And so I don't mind dealing with spider mites on these plants. I've also changed the way that I treat for spider mites. I don't like spraying things on my alocasia, even though they take it well. I don't like it because the leaves, sometimes like I would mix a spray and it would be a little bit too strong and the leaf would start spotting or just looking really And then also too, those sprays are like super messy and I don't like that. So they're super messy and I have hardwood floors and I hated the cleanup and then I don't like wiping down plants. So I just felt like spraying was too much. Spraying just took up too much of my time and I don't want to spend all my day. I don't want to spend all Sunday spraying plants. I just don't. So yeah, so none of my allocations I spray. Believe it or not, the Chantrieri doesn't really, I don't know, spider mites don't really mess with him. They mess with him sometimes. They don't mess with him a lot though. Alocasia poly doesn't matter. They mess with the Alocasia poly. They love my poly. My poly, I don't know. All my allocations. And the funny thing is, this sits right next to my poly. No spider mites touch it. No spider mites touch any of the plants that are near my poly. They just want the poly. And that's actually a lot of the, like my spider mite ridden plants. It'll just be them, no one else. All of it. I mean, the spider mites might even crawl on other things. They don't matter. They don't care. So I hear a lot about beneficial bugs. I've tried that in a garden. Those ladybugs just fly away the next day. I'm not a fan. However, in the home, I don't know. This is how I look at beneficial bugs. I have not met a person who has used beneficial bugs inside their house and it has totally eradicated any of their pest pressures. I hear people talk a lot about how, oh, this has worked for me, but then I don't really ever hear updates. And then like 6 months later, they're still talking about how they treat for spider mites. From what I've heard from a lot of other people is they work, but they're expensive. They have to constantly be replenished. They're just not for me. Beneficial insects just aren't cost effective, the predatory mites. So what I do, and this is super low tech and simple, and I promise you this is what I do, and I've been doing it for the past, I'm going to say 8 months now, and it has worked really, really well. You will not see any spider mite damage on any of my alocasias at all. And it's super simple. It is a feather duster. That is right. It's just the feather duster. Let me tell you what I do. I go around, put this down. So what I do is I just take a leaf, dust, I don't even do it this many times. I just dust. Just bam, 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 bam. That's it. And then I just do the back. Bam, 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 bam. Do all that, get everything. And that's all I do. It is getting difficult to do on this one because it's growing so many leaves that it's a chore. However, I don't know. I hit this maybe once every 2 weeks. I don't know. And I kind of like doing this. Like, I thought the novelty would wear off after a while, but I don't know. I feel like I'm made in like one of those like novellas. Anyway, so when you spray your plant, it kills the spider mites that are on the plant. But if you have a large plant collection, those spider mites aren't just on that plant. They're probably on all of your other plants. And I know this for a fact because I see spider mites all the time on plants that they don't eat. I actually saw a red spider mite. It was like crawling across my cell phone. I don't even know how it got there. They're bigger and they're just a different animal altogether. So when you start spraying one plant and you're thinking that you got it and eradicated everything, for one, you probably didn't get the eggs. So whatever insecticide you use, you need to make sure that it also kills eggs. You need to know that information. This works really, really well on those because basically all you're doing is you're interrupting the life cycle of the spider mites with the duster. Every time you dust, okay, you're wiping off the webbing. You're wiping off some of the eggs, I'm sure. I don't know how sticky they are on the leaves, but you're wiping all of that off. So even if, say, you wipe off, because at the end of the day, spider mites aren't hard to kill. It's just that they got numbers, okay? So when you wipe this off, and I wipe a little aggressively, your plant's good. And so it takes them a little while to rebound. But you know what? It doesn't matter because by the time they rebounded, you're already wiping again. 2 weeks later, you're wiping again. You're wiping again. That has been what has worked for me. So yeah, in that time, I have not sprayed any of my plants. This is literally the only tool that I use for pest management with my Alocasia. But anyway, that's all I have for you. If this is interesting to you in any way, please like and subscribe. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions, if you want me to cover another subject. I know we are not finished talking about Alocasia. There is so much more that I want to say. I just need to collect my thoughts a little bit better next time. Thank you.